Hello and good evening, and welcome to yet another episode of Beating COVID-19. And today I'm happy to uh, welcome you to this evening's event. And today's discussion is a bit thought provoking, to say the least. So I urge you all to take time to look at the research material, search the web after this, read what I'll put in the comments, and also search for yourself and make an informed understanding of what we are discussing today. Today's discussion is squarely in the line of how COVID-19 is being managed. And we're not blaming anyone, we're not asking for any problems, we're not causing any issues, we're just informing the public of the methodology in use. And to let you know that there is more than one. And to also give you examples of places where either one has succeeded or failed. Number one, we've all had the famous statement, flatten the curve. And everyone's to be flatten the curve. We're supposed to stay home, wash hands, and all that kind of thing. And all the campaign is for flattening the curve. And we've all done that, and we have been flattening the curve. And so far, so good. The curve is still flat. However, there are countries which attempted to do the flattening, and they were not that successful. And we can see French, Spain, France, UK, US. The numbers are on the roof, and in China when it began. However, there are countries that have flattened the curve successfully, like Taiwan, South Korea, Vietnam. They have successfully flattened the curve. And they flattened the curve because under the methodology of flattening the curve, they use the three methodology called TTI, which is test, track, isolate, or test, track, treat, and isolate. So it is either TTI or TTTI. I have it in my notes. Okay, back to the broadcast. TTI is to test, trace, isolate. And this is what we are doing. We are testing, tracing, and isolating. And it means that we have to rely on a very rigid testing regime to find infected people or test people en masse to find the infected ones. Then we shall trace their contacts, and in gross we shall isolate them, and that is what we've been doing with the quarantine and all the measures that we have taken. And it's highly successful because it narrows it creates a map of where the virus has gone. Like in South Korea, they were very keen to do their TTI because a few years earlier, one case of MERS, this is the Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome, flew from, I think it was somewhere in the Middle East, and went back to South Korea, and he infected quite a few people. And then by the time it was treated, the South Korean nation, as a group, decided that the health policy has to be strengthened so that they can fend off any future occurrence of a virus without a cure. And hence, when COVID-19 began, South Korea went into high gear because they had learned the lessons from before. And because of that, they were very effective in their mass testing, very effective in developing their own diagnostic kits, their PPEs, and they hit the ground running. And before long, and you can see from the graph, and I'll show you on one of the attached videos, you'll notice that the graph shoots up and then it levels out and then it goes down. And like now, as you can see, the statistics show that I think they have not had a case in several weeks now, which will mean they have effectively conquered COVID-19 in that country. And that's because of the rigorous targeted approach. They even had tracing apps on their phone, which told them that, like for example, if you had on your phone and then you walked near a place where a previous infected person had passed, you would get a notification that beware, you're approaching an area which an infected person has passed, and hence avoid it or move away from it. And in so doing, their track, trace, test, trace, isolate, and treat policy has paid off. And that's the number one formula that is being advocated for the control and management of COVID-19. But it's not the only one. The second one was very well articulated by the British government before they switched to the first one, and it was called the herd immunity. Now, what is herd immunity? I'm sure many of you have heard it, but no one, maybe few of you know exactly what herd immunity is. And it is, I would put it like, for example, it's the point at which a society has enough collective immunity to prevent the spread of a virus. Because if the virus hops from an infected person, the next possible person it will find is immune. So herd immunity is built over time. It's accelerated by vaccines, and depending on where you are able to achieve herd immunity either quickly or slowly. Now, herd immunity has got its drawbacks, because herd immunity also thins the herd. Let's just use that term properly, because it means that the purpose, if let loose uncontrolled, the vulnerable in society will be the casualties of this virus, and the herd immunity will thin out the herd, meaning that only the strong will survive. Natural selection, the kind of thing, evolution, the works people have talked about it before. There will be a selective process naturally, and those who have any failings that they cannot withstand the virus will be casualties of the virus, and that could be a very high population. And which also means that herd immunity is discouraged because of its potential death toll. And I'm sure that's one of the arguments that have been brought forward for it. However, herd immunity is good immunity, because it means that the more you're closing, you're boxing out the virus. And I think it's worth a thought. Please do not quote me on this, but I think it's worth a thought. However, between the two methods, all are going to achieve the same result, which is to reduce or eliminate the virus from the society. And all of them are going to achieve the same objective of herd immunity ultimately. Whether we flatten the curve or we go herd immunity immediately, the end result is that there will be a collective community of resistant people, and the virus will have little or nowhere to go. However, if you ask me, I think, before I go to what you are, my own opinion, let's note the fundamental differences. Flattening the curve relies on antigen tests. Antigen tests are tests for the viral virus infection in the person. Herd immunity is built upon antibody tests, which tells you who has had the virus before and who has antibodies for that virus. So whereas there is a cost implication, the antigen tests are maybe, I think, a bit more expensive than antibody tests. Maybe that can be proved later, or somebody can provide that documentation for cost. But I do know, like, for example, the Senegal $1 test is an antibody test, whereas the rapid PCR is an antigen test. So we are faced with that calamity of choice. But if you ask me, back to me and my humble opinion, I think we can do it together. And I look at this because there is a very good gentleman on YouTube by the name of Dr. Campbell. Dr. Campbell is British, and he's pretty precise on many things. And I follow him, and I look at his broadcasts, and I follow his YouTube subscriptions, and I'm sure most of you have heard of him. His channel has become quite big. He's been featured in news media. He's been interviewed all over the world. But before all that big and bright lights, I was following him, and I found that his information was pretty solid. And it is in that regard where he brought up a very interesting analogy, whereby you fight the virus from the top and from the bottom. And I think you chip away at the virus both ways. You end up having a situation whereby you are burning the candle from both sides, which means the candle burns faster, which means the pandemic can be reduced faster. If you ask me, I think that would be a good policy move, but I am not a policy maker. I am just an observer informing the public. So, what does that combination of the two mean? If I take the British approach, which was to isolate the vulnerable, as in certain age groups were to be kept not away from society but shielded from society. so that infection can't get to them, like the old and the frail and the unwell. That means you remove from the herd the weak and vulnerable, and let the herd be made up of strong, likely to survive individuals. That is like choosing your soldiers for battle. Now, once you go to battle, because there is no cure, there is no medicine, there is no vaccine, the antibody generation will be the young, the fit, the healthy, because the asymptomatic and mild are about 50 to 80%. The statistics vary, but it is a big chunk of people who will be mild or asymptomatic. And then those who need medical care will be forwarded to medical care, where they'll either have assisted oxygen or intubated for ventilation. And then those who were really critical go into ICU, and some survive even up to there, but some perish. So you can send in a herd of healthy people into the world. And then on the other hand, you do a lot of antibody testing on this herd, so that you can know what percentage of the herd has antibodies, the immunity, what's the collective immunity of the herd. Whereas on the other hand, you are also chipping away at the top by doing tests on people to find where the virus is and where it's going. Is it do we have an epicenter coming up in, say, Mombasa here in the coast? Or do we have an epicenter coming up in Migori, which is somewhere on the west? Or do we have an epicenter popping up somewhere in Marsabit? We can be able to note these things, because the moment we see numbers going up, we engage in targeted mass testing on that area and that area, so that we can get a statistic of what's happening. And when we give mandatory commands that the old and frail and vulnerable should retreat from society, which means we should have value addition services to help them, to help them, like supplies of food, supplies of their own medications which they take, maybe for diabetes, whatever, have it sent to them, and also a care mechanism that sort of it shields them from active society. That, I think, would be a good combination, because the young, the fit, the healthy have a good chance of surviving, according to the global statistics right now. Therefore, if we develop enough herd immunity, then we can extinguish the flame of the virus, because the virus will have nowhere else to go. It doesn't have a brain, or doesn't read maps, or doesn't spy on newspapers that it will go look for your grand old parents or whatever. It is you who will take it there. If you have it and you take it home and to your grand folks, they will get it from you. They won't get it from a knowledgeable virus. This is not science fiction. This is science fact. So I urge you all to look at your world with open eyes and see what's happening, and also take the necessary steps to protect yourself from getting it as we wait for the vaccine, because the vaccine will accelerate herd immunity. But in the event the vaccine is late or is not late in coming, then I think we need to look and find out how much herd immunity we have, so that we can be able to balance the needs of society versus the needs of society. I mean, needs of society meaning health versus the needs of society, the ability to sustain a healthy society. Because if it continues this way, we will have issues. And I think in tomorrow's broadcast, I think I will cover the effect of COVID-19 on economies, because I did it before, and now we have the World Economic Forum Strategic Intelligence Model that is running. And I think if you look in the previous episodes, you will find a clip to it. It's a wonderful spreadsheet, active diagram, which keeps adding data as we go along. So see you tomorrow, and think about it. It's either flattening the curve or herd immunity, one of the two. And I will attach documentations for both, including YouTube videos from people who are more qualified than I am, of course. On the side of herd immunity, there are some countries which have not achieved that. They have shown promise in herd immunity, and that would be like Sweden also is there. And there are many other countries that did not lock down their countries, and they just kept things. Norway, I think the Scandinavians were spearheading the herd immunity movement, and I think they've flattened their curve that way. Yeah. So thank you for your time. God bless you. And take time to know what's happening and be a part of the team. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. It comes at the notification comes at the end of the clip. And I wish you a good night and God bless and see you tomorrow or see you on the next one. Thank you.